So, just a few weeks ago, one of the biggest lawsuits in NCAA history that changed the landscape concluded. What does that mean? Well, it's time for a new one. There is another lawsuit that's in the works right now that is going to shift how NCAA athletics look. How will Iowa State be affected? Tune in today to find out on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you for being here every single day, making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcasting platform, be sure to hit subscribe so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. Today, we're talking about Wisconsin, Miami, the whole debacle. Now it's in the lawsuit kind of category. How does that affect Iowa State? Will it? Won't it? You're going to have to find out. You're going to have to stick around to find out what I think on that end, because there's two sides to that coin. Then we're going to talk about some of the most important games in this college football season, not just for Iowa State, but across the board. Is Iowa State in that category? Maybe once, maybe twice, maybe three times Iowa State plays monumental games this upcoming season. Then finally, we're going to talk about CBS and their college football playoff predictions. I think you can probably guess why, but maybe not. I don't know. You're going to have to stick around to find out. Can't wait to dive into all of that and more. But first, this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Let's dive into this first major story, I suppose, of Wisconsin kind of going into the whole lawsuit realm with Miami. Now, if you remember a few months ago, Xavier Lucas, basically unenrolled from Wisconsin to be able to transfer to Miami. It was a loophole that we hadn't really seen before. This whole concept of the transfer portal being out of control and all of these people going in and like rosters being decimated. That was already something that we were dealing with, but it did seem to have, at least, even though it was super, super small, some tiny element of regulation. There were windows. There were maybe some sort of rules to some extent. There was at least some structure. But when Xavier Lucas unenrolled from Wisconsin and then enrolled in Miami, that really threw a wrench in basically what everyone's idea of what could possibly happen was, right? Now there's just no rules. Now you can just basically do whatever you want. Why is the transfer portal even a thing? When you can literally just unenroll and then enroll somewhere else. Now, I threw up some questions on Twitter regarding this exact topic with this lawsuit now coming out. You can find me at Nick_Marv. And the comments underneath it were very interesting. Obviously, I read everything that's kind of tied to my account, so I was kind of keeping up with what people were thinking, and they were all over the place. There didn't really seem to be a great consensus on what exactly happened, why what happened did, and what the ramifications of this are. So with this lawsuit now kind of in full swing here, I thought it was at least worth mentioning and seeing how Iowa State will be affected by this. So basically what happened here is Wisconsin filed a complaint against the University of Miami alleging tortious interference. They filed Friday in a Wisconsin State Circuit Court. They allege that the Miami Hurricanes, I suppose, poached freshman defensive back Xavier Lucas, who had signed a revenue-sharing contract with Wisconsin. Now, let's dive kind of really quickly through this recap of what's actually happening, then we'll tie it back to Iowa State. Wisconsin is seeking financial damages and a judgment that Miami's actions were, quote, that they wrongfully interfere with contractual commitments. Beyond that, Wisconsin is enforcing its contract with Lucas, which we'll get to in a second here. But essentially, the Lucas's attorney is saying that he was never compensated through the deal. There's always going to be a lot of stuff going on here, but it is what it is. All right, let's try to make the most sense of it that we can. So from now on, when I refer to student athlete A, it appears as though Lucas is student athlete A. This quote here I believe comes directly from the report or the case, I guess, maybe the word. Quote, accordingly, at the conclusion of the 2024 season, UW Madison and VC Connect offered, negotiated, and executed separate NIL contracts with student athlete A, under which he would receive one of the most lucrative NIL financial commitments of any UW Madison football player, the complaint states. Quote, within days of contract execution, however, Miami knowingly induced student athlete A to abandon his contractual commitments to plaintiffs. As a result of Miami's actions, student athlete A abruptly left UW Madison's football program and enrolled at Miami, causing plaintiffs to suffer substantial pecuniary and reputational harm. I understand that you probably went to sleep there for a second. I almost did as well, and I'm actually reading it. There's a reason I'm not a lawyer. Pecuniary, I did look it up. Essentially, that's like related to money. That makes sense, I suppose, if there's going to be these contracts that were signed. UW Madison, obviously, University of Wisconsin. I don't think there were too many other words in here. I assume that you understand what reputational means, but if not, Google and ChatGPT, I believe, are still free to use. Let's just kind of break this down here. Really, this lawsuit at the way I see this isn't going to have major effects on how the NCAA does the transfer portal. I don't think that this is necessarily tied to that because it sounds like it's literally just like, hey, we want some money back basically. And so for that reason, I don't think that this is necessarily too tied to the NCAA transfer portal. I've also got this quote here. Quote, Miami's actions are in direct contravention of not only the NCAA's established anti-tampering rules designated to maintain the integrity of the transfer process and ensure fair competition among member institutions, but also established contract and tort law. So it's kind of tying it in. It's referencing it, but it doesn't seem like they're searching for a way to kind of get around this. Really, what I'm seeing here is nothing too crazy. Obviously, the Big Ten is backing Wisconsin. Duh, I think that makes sense. From Iowa State's perspective, this I don't think is going to play a large role in anything moving forward. Why? Well, one, based on my interpretation, this isn't going to be something that's going to drastically change the NCAA's rules. I think this is something that a lot of people were shocked by, and it's not something that's like common practice, especially with this exact situation, having signed contracts and whatnot, and then another university being like, yo, you should come play for us. I don't think that that's not necessarily going to be commonplace. I don't think Iowa State is going to be too affected by this lawsuit. If it were to be affected, though, I don't think Iowa State would actually be affected at all because I don't think guys that go to Iowa State are going to be dropping out and transferring somewhere else. The way I see it, they'll transfer the right way because they want to do right by the coaches at Iowa State and by really the program as a whole. We saw Jet Tamala, and when he picked Alabama, called Iowa State and was like, yo, this is the decision I'm making. I appreciate everything you guys did for me. The way Iowa State conducts its business, especially in football, but also in every sport, every athletics department, or I guess individual athletic team, really, because the athletics department is kind of one thing. It's very, very classy. Everyone's, it's like you're not a number, you're a person. We're going to take care of you. We're going to develop you. It's a very interpersonal relationship. I don't think Iowa State will be affected by this at all. Now, obviously, developments may come in and things could change, but I wanted to kind of talk about this, lay out the situation, and basically say I'm not worried about Iowa State in this situation at all. And it's really that simple. I think Iowa State, even if there were some major rule changes, I don't think this matters to Iowa State. I think all the players essentially would follow along that path of entering the transfer portal and then doing it the right way, as opposed to just leaving Iowa State, because Iowa State treats their players so well. I don't see a world or a reality where an Iowa State player is like, yep, peace, I'm out. You guys figure it out, basically. I don't think it's that way. I think that's what makes Iowa State so special. Even when we don't necessarily have, 10, 11 win seasons every year, the culture, the development, the turning the boys to men kind of idea behind what I believe Iowa State is in that quote unquote mission statement. I think that that's really important. I think that's what Iowa State is at its core. Let's go ahead and move on from some really just astronomically boring, really, really boring legal speak and talk about something a little bit more exciting, actual football games. Talking about that coming up right after this. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So, in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. I've talked about my personal favorite feature is the fact that you can plan alongside your partner. It makes it super easy to budget and to do all of those sorts of things with another person. This app for me personally really helped me lay out kind of what I was spending money on, what our goals are, what can we do to move towards those goals the best. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LockedOnCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LockedOnCollege for half off your first year. So now we're pivoting into football. Well, real football games that will be played, not football matches going down in the courtroom. You're here with Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I saw that Joel Klatt picked his 10 games that will shape the 2025 college football season. I don't know why I still get my hopes up for stuff like this. I really need to understand that these major talking heads just haven't caught on to the fact that Iowa State is one of the best teams in the nation. They're going to make a ton of noise this year. Obviously rising in relevance. They're just not quite there yet. It's going to take a little bit of time, a little bit longer. So I scrolled through these 10 games and expected Iowa State and Kansas State for sure to be on this list. Nonetheless, I did not find them. Okay. Let's talk about the ones that I did see. They weren't very shocking. Let's say Texas, Ohio State, LSU, Clemson, Michigan, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Notre Dame, Oregon, Penn State, USC, Illinois, Alabama, Georgia, Penn State, Ohio State, LSU, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan. Wow, shockers across the board. I know. I hope you were sitting. I didn't give a warning, say, hey, make sure you're seated before I read these games. Some hot takes in here. No, I mean, those are pretty standard games for the most part. We didn't really branch off a whole lot. But nonetheless, I still think that Iowa State, Kansas State, Farmageddon over in Dublin, Ireland, is one of these top 10 games. Now, I'm not going to substitute it out for any one of the games that are on there right now. I just don't really care enough to do that. It doesn't matter anyway. Joel Klatt, if you're watching this, I just think you're missing one game. That's all. Nothing wrong with the games that you picked per se. Why, though? Why is Iowa State, Kansas State so important? Because, yeah, if it's coming from Locked On Cyclones, if it's coming from an Iowa State fan, of course he's going to pick it to be one of the most important games of the season. Of course he is. Duh. We don't need to hear anything else. This is bias. I disagree. I really do think that Iowa State, Kansas State is going to be important in the winner of the Big 12 race. In my opinion, I think Iowa State and Kansas State will both very much be in that conversation come November 10th or whatever, with only 3 games to go, just after that game on the 8th, that week at least. I think Iowa State and Kansas State will very much be in that running, and it will kind of depend on where the chips fall. Is Iowa State undefeated? More than likely. Is Kansas State only have 1 loss? I don't know for sure. I can bet Christian Rao will tell you that they will be. We'll talk to him tomorrow for another episode of Farmageddon Friday. And maybe we'll ask him this exact question in the 3rd segment. But nonetheless, I do think that this game is going to be huge for who is positioned where come the end of the season. Whichever team takes the loss here, you have to crawl your way back a little bit. And that's just common sense. But let's zoom out a little bit more. Why does the winner of the Big 12 play a role in the top 10 games of the season? You kind of got to draw a little bit of a flow chart here, a little bit of not a Venn diagram. That's really what I was thinking, but I think flow chart's probably the best word to use. Essentially, look at Iowa State, Kansas State leading to the winner of the Big 12. Will it directly impact the winner of the Big 12? Maybe, maybe not. My guess is yes. So we're going to make that connection. Okay. Then you go from winner of the Big 12. Now you got to see that they're in the playoffs. That's how we're doing it. Into the championship game, win the championship game, into the playoffs. That's where I think that this becomes one of the most important games of the season, because I think that the Big 12 will make a lot of noise in the college football playoff this season. Is it one team? Is it two teams? Is it three teams, 4 teams, 12 teams? Probably not 12 based on my understanding of the format right now. But I do think Iowa State and the Big 12, I think Iowa State obviously in particular, because I think that they'll be going to the playoff. But the Big 12 as a whole is going to be very, very good this season. And when they get into the playoff, they're going to make some noise. Arizona State last year was literally like one play away from beating Texas. And I know it's coulda, shoulda, woulda. And I understand that Iowa State fell to Arizona State. I get that, but I was cheering on the Big 12 in that game, and it was so close. And that conversation around the SEC and the Big 10 and the Big 12 and this whole power dynamic, and Matt Rule making comments about the SEC and the Big 12 or the Big 10 being miles ahead of the Big 12 and the ACC and whatever. Do all those comments happen if Arizona State, the team picked to place last in the Big 12, defeats the almighty Texas SEC team? I don't know if those conversations sound the same. I don't think they do. However, I will admit it probably is going to take more than just 1 year to really change those conversations. I know that completely undermines what I just said, but the point remains that last year, the Big 12, aka ASU, was very, very close to shaking up that playoff. And I think this year, just looking at the teams across the board, we've done most important games. We've done teams that are probably going to be very, very good, teams that aren't going to be very good at all. It's hard to really lay all of that out because I think that the Big 12 is across the board a very good conference. Now, there's obviously levels to it. There are teams that are better than others. But I think whoever gets in, the top of the top, that kind of top tier of, Iowa State, Kansas State, Arizona State, maybe BYU, maybe Baylor, maybe potentially Colorado, maybe TCU, Texas Tech, maybe Utah. Who knows about West Virginia? That list is so long because I think that this Big 12 conference can be very, very good this year. Whoever gets in, I think is going to make a lot of noise. And so now if we can back it up a little bit, if Iowa State and Kansas State are in that conversation, if they are a part of that conversation, where they're at in that conversation will be dictated by this Farmageddon game. A lot of words there just came out of my mouth. They're still kind of bouncing off the walls in here. They're still floating around, and they're kind of coming back to me, and I'm hearing them. And I understand how much it took for me to convey the point that Farmageddon, I think, is one of the top 10 most important games this season. Is it Alabama, Georgia? No, it's not. And it's going to take a lot of, probably many, many years to convince people that it's worth, kind of that same conversation. But I do think it is in this situation, the way the Big 12 is. I personally think that this is a huge game for the season. And of course, it kicks off the year. Plus, you're overseas. I mean, all signs point to a great time and an unbelievable game. Like, just me personally, that's what I'm thinking. Now, maybe you disagree, maybe you agree. I don't know for sure. But I think that Iowa State, Kansas State here is going to be not only an instant classic, very, very good game, but very important to the season that is the Big 12. And then therefore, if it comes down to a championship, kind of, are you in or are you out based on every single game matters? This is one of those games against between two very high level opponents. That this game, the way I see it, plays a very, very large role. But like I said, it plays a role because of the college football playoff. That's really what you have to do. That's the tier you have to get to talk about those 10 most important games. And I'm not the only one that thinks Iowa State's going to make it into the college football playoff this season. I know. Shocking, for sure. We're going to talk about that coming up right after this. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rougiette Ready. Rougiette Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours. Rougette's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average, in just 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. I love that it's completely online. Rougette connects you with a board-certified doctor and ships your treatment discreetly to your door. Head to rougette.com/lockedoncollege and use code lockedoncollege to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/lockedoncollege and use promo code lockedoncollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rougette website for full safety information. You're here with Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Of course, I think Iowa State's going to the college football playoff. Of course, I think that Iowa State's going to win it all. Hopes are high. It is June 26th. Yes, the hopes are still high. Okay. Thankful you're here. We're going to break down in this third segment. CBS, however, thinks that Iowa State is going to make the college football playoffs. I was shocked by this. I was. We'll get through kind of the playoffs as a whole, where Iowa State sits, why I think potentially they think this. What? Who knows? What are we talking about? Well, let's just start with who's in the playoff. In the first round, they have Notre Dame Navy as a 5-12 matchup. They have Oregon Georgia as a 7-10. They have LSU Miami as an 8-9. They have Iowa State Alabama. I probably should have read those in the other order. Alabama Iowa State, number 6, number 11. So Iowa State just getting in ahead of that 12 spot there. Then you've got their projections for the rest of the season. Yeah, we're just going to go ahead and say that Iowa State got in at the 11th spot there. Very exciting that Iowa State was considered to be one of the best teams in the nation at this point. You know, that is at this point in the season, I think that that's a big deal. I'm not going to let that slide under the radar at all. This is a situation where we're looking at straight seeding this season. So they think Iowa State's going to finish in the top 11, which does make sense. Probably at 11. That's very high based on what we've seen in the past. This is kind of monumental, you know. Let's not get too crazy here, but we've seen a lot of Iowa State at, you know, maybe mid-teens, mid to high teens, in the 20s, whatever, not ranked very high, especially in the Big 12. This, right? I mean, are you kidding me? I think this is a super big deal. The perception is what this really is all about. Just the way I see it. Now, not a conference champion, but still makes it in. That means they're a very good team. And we've talked about why I think this team is going to be very, very good. For those of you that are just now listening for the first time, basically it comes down to the tight ends, the linebackers, Rocco. I think that the wide receivers are going to be very good. I think that the defensive line is going to be very good, and that's going to help out the secondary immensely. That's pretty much every position group. But at the end of the day, I do think that Iowa State is a better football team this year than they were last year. And so we don't have to get too much into why, you know, is Iowa State going to win this many games? I've said I think that their ceiling's about 10 or 11 wins. I think their floor's about 8. I've laid out which teams I think they're going to beat, which teams I think they might fall to, who are the shockers, who are the gimmies, if you will. Even games like Iowa, I think that's a gimme a little bit. I think Iowa State comes away with that one. There are games later in the season that I'm not so sure on because the Big 12 being the Big 12. Really what I want to talk about here is the perception. I feel like this is a really, really, really big deal. The way that I see this, CBS is looking at the Big 12 and saying, you know what, Iowa State, they're that team. After Higgins and Noel leave. Well, go to the NFL. Didn't transfer out or anything. And that has been not very abundant this offseason. It's probably the worst possible way I could have said that. But what I'm saying is everyone this offseason, any major outlet, news outlet, I guess, besides Locked On Cyclones, has claimed Iowa State is going to be basically the bottom of the barrel. You don't have your wide receivers returning, and you look at how good the defense was last year. It wasn't that great, and well, yeah, we had a lot of injuries. I'm not going to lie to you guys. We weren't in a great spot. And Higgins and Noel leaving, I'm not too worried about. Chase Sowell and Xavier Townsend coming in, going to ball out for sure, but that's not it. Look how many tight ends are coming back from injury. Look at how many tight ends balled out last year. Cooper Alexander might be the truth. I mean, legitimately. I seriously, I cannot wait to see this kid play ball. Okay. And all of that to say, I didn't even touch on the running backs. That is pretty good answer as far as you're missing your top 2 wide receivers. Okay, let's spread the ball out a little bit more. How are defenses going to respond when they have to cover 7 guys? Obviously not 7, but you understand the point. It's a little bit tougher to cover 5 options, 4 options for sure, I think, on a lot of plays, depending on if we chip block or what we do with the running back or whatever the case might be. Maybe even, who knows, 6. But every single one of those wide receivers is very competent, very capable of getting open, creating space, coming down with catches, deep, in the red zone, in those goal-to-go situations. You need a score. Not only can Iowa State do it through the air, not only could Iowa State throw it up to Chase Sowell at 6'4", not only could Iowa State throw it to the back of the end zone to Bramer, and he comes down with a one-handed catch, Iowa State could also hand it off to Carson Hansen or Abu Sama. Iowa State could also run it with Rocco Becht, whose legs were criminally underrated last season. This team is going to be very, very good. And that is not what we've heard from these outlets all offseason. It's always been Iowa State. Yeah, they were okay last year. We're going to give Matt Campbell a little bit of street cred here. That's basically what this ranking is based on. But we need to see this team do it. And I don't necessarily think that that's the worst frame of mind ever. I understand, completely that you need to see it, especially from a program that hasn't necessarily been in the top 10 at the end of every season for the last 30 years. Excuse me. I didn't even do that on purpose. I understand that. Okay. However, still a little bit disrespectful. So for CBS to come out and say, you know what? I think that Iowa State is going to be legitimate this year. I think that they are going to make a bunch of big plays. They're going to win a bunch of big games. They might not come away with the conference championship. They might not come away with the Dr. Pepper Bowl, basically, the Dr. Pepper Trophy, but they are going to be one of the best 11 teams in the country, and they will get a crack at the college football playoffs. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? When you get to the playoffs, it's 0-0. It's every man for himself. And I believe that Iowa State's heart can really it's going to make some noise. Like I said in the last segment, though, Big 12 in general, I think is going to make a lot of noise this year in the playoff. But if Iowa State's in there, better look out. I mean, this projection, Alabama, who comes next? Doesn't even matter. Iowa State's coming away with that win, in my opinion. It's a huge win, I will say. If you hit that subscribe button down below, completely free, helps me prove that it's, in fact, a Cyclone state. It can be a major part of something epic here at Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you guys for sticking around till this point. Tomorrow, Farmageddon Friday with Christian Rauer, breaking down more on the Farmageddon matchup overseas. In my opinion, one of the top 10 games of the college football season. I'll see you guys then. Until next time, Cyclone fans, sayonara.